A first alert for you. Action 2 News has learned about accusations of a Brady violation against a now former Waupaca County deputy.
A Brady violation is the failure to disclose evidence that could determine guilt or innocence in a criminal case. It could potentially impact criminal cases in Waupaca and other counties. However, that former deputy also lodging his own allegations against the Waupaca County District Attorney. Samantha Cavalli joins us with new details after looking through that document filed just a few days ago. Samantha.
Right, Cami and Chris. Well, this 107-page document contains details about a Brady violation lodged against that former deputy, Justin Malig. Now, we found details about this in another criminal file, although the district attorney says there's no direct connection. Now, it contains a letter Malig wrote to all three Waupaca County judges outlining his own allegations against District Attorney Kat Turner.
What Justin Malig put in that memo appears to be self-serving, and there are a lot of inaccuracies.
Waupaca County District Attorney Kat Turner became aware of what she calls a report she believed to be incorrect made by former Waupaca County Deputy Justin Malig. In February 2024, DA Turner conducted an investigation into Malig regarding a Brady violation.
That led to additional investigation into his personnel file, which uncovered additional instances of dishonesty.
Turner's investigation alleges Malig did not have probable cause to initiate a traffic stop in July of 2023. She says that case and others are now dismissed because of the Brady violation. Turner also alerted local defense attorneys who have cases pending that involve the former deputy.
You make them aware that we are aware that there have been some instance of dishonesty by that particular officer.
In a letter to Waupaca County judges, Malig claims that he did not commit any Brady violations and lodges his own complaints against DA Turner. He writes, quote, "He has upcoming cases in this court that are in jeopardy because of this nonsense," end quote. Malig's attorney, Jeff Scott Olson, tells Action 2 News that he won't allow his client to speak with us. But court documents show in an email and in an in-person conversation, Malig asked DA Turner to rescind her Brady notification. She declined. DA Turner also wrote the district attorneys in Columbia and Outagamie counties, where Malig currently works for respective police departments, of the Brady violation. She says it is now up to them to conduct their own independent investigation if they so choose.
I've reviewed all of the materials. I feel confident and comfortable with my Brady determination that's been made. It's unfortunate, but I stand by that determination.
Now, this document, Malig provides paperwork that he says proves he's innocent of any Brady violation, including that police report he wrote following the traffic stop and the files from the FBI that show he looked up the plates before initiating that traffic stop. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. Reporting in the Fox Valley Newsroom, Samantha Cavalli, Action 2 News.